Okay, we're live. Yes, yes. Okay, we are live. Welcome. I am so grateful that you're here with me on the live today. And this is my first big live stream into my business Facebook page. And I'm just really excited to be here and just so grateful that you could join me today. If you're joining me today on the replay or on my YouTube channel, thank you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And again, I am so grateful that you're here. And I'm just going to check. It looks like everything is good and we are live. So let's get started with today. Let's get started on a positive note. I believe that making time for yourself to create something with your hands is the absolute most loving thing that you can do for yourself. I believe it's like the highest form of self-care. So I want to help you bring this into your life a little bit more. And hi, Merla. I'm happy to see you today too. So as the comments pop in, there might be a little bit of a lag, but I will try to answer questions along the way. And I will also try to say hello and acknowledge everyone who is popping in. So I'm also going to be following up after the live stream. So if you have questions about anything that I'm sharing today along the way, please feel free to put it in the comments. I'm happy to go back in, answer your questions, provide links, and redirect. So I am really, really excited to get started. So let's go ahead and dive in. Today, I'm going to be covering some basic watercolor techniques and basic watercolor supplies to get started. I'm answering some of the questions, the number one questions that I get via direct message or via email. And I love getting the questions and I love sharing, but I thought it would be really helpful to dive in today in this live stream with some basics about watercolor. So today I'm going to be sharing a bit about paper stock. I'm going to share a bit about different watercolor supplies, liquids, pan, tube, and some of the differences between those supplies. I'm going to talk about my favorite brushes, and then we're going to go down, to our project cam and talk about my favorite technique for watercolor, and that's what I call the washy watercolor technique, but it's really the wet watercolor technique. So I'm going to talk about it, demystify it a little bit. One of the big things that I get asked a lot is, how do I control watercolor? It feels like a medium that is a runaway medium for me. It makes me a little anxious because it just kind of goes wherever. So I'm going to talk a little bit about controlling your watercolor pigment with the flow of your water. So, okay. And then I'm going to finish off today's live stream with a little Blooming with Joy coloring freebie that I'm making available to you. If you're already an email subscriber with me, you've already received this wonderful download, but I want to offer it up to anyone else who might be interested. Okay, so we're going to get started first with answering the biggest question I get. And I'm going to go down to my project cam here. And one of the biggest questions I get is, what paper stock should I use for watercolor? And what I'm about to share will apply if you're using watercolor for paper crafting, for your card making, or just your general painting. Hi, Sylvia. It's so nice to see you. Thank you for joining in. So feel free, like I said a little bit earlier, if you're just coming on, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to pop them in to the comments and I will get your questions. I'll try to answer them along the way, especially if it's about something that I'm showing. And I will definitely be popping into the live stream afterwards and answering questions as well. So, okay, so let's go ahead down to my project cam here. So, alrighty, I've got a little setup here of some things that I'm going to be sharing. But first, before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about papers. Now, if you've followed my YouTube channel, we'll start off with my 100% cotton papers. If you've been a follower of mine and you've followed my YouTube channel for a while, you'll know that every time I have a paper crafting or a card making project, I'm sharing this paper. So some of my favorite papers to use are 100% cotton. Okay, so when you're looking for a paper and you're doing watercolor techniques that are really wet and washy, you really want to look for a paper that's 100% cotton. Now, this is one of my favorites from the Bee Paper Company. Love, love, love this paper. One of the issues with this right now, I understand, is that it's difficult to get. So I have some alternatives that I'm going to share. But you can find this online, and you can also find online in places like Amazon or Dick Blick, Art Supply. There's lots of places that have it. It's the Aqua Bee line. I've also found it in some big box craft stores, so like Michael's. So you can find it there as well. But it is one of my favorites. It comes in a 6x9. It's actually the paper I'm going to be demoing with today. But I'm going to show you some of my other favorites. Okay, let's just go ahead. Sorry about that. We had a little ding, so let's make sure that ding doesn't happen. Okay, nothing like a live stream, right? Okay, so here is my stack of watercolor papers that I'm going to share. Now, one of the common papers that you can find everywhere is this Canson watercolor paper. It's on a pad. It's cold press, and I'm talking today about cold press paper exclusively. It's 140 pound. It's a nice paper, but what I want to share about this paper has a nice texture to it. It's a really, really nice paper. But what I want to share is that it is not 100% cotton. So it doesn't like to take on the water as much as some of the other 100% cotton papers would. This is what's called a wood pulp paper. So basically they make the paper by pulverizing the wood pulp together to make the paper versus 100% cotton paper. There's a lot more fiber in the paper, and when you're watercoloring with it, the watercolor will go into the paper and seep into the fibers, and it can take a lot of heavy, heavy watercolor washes. Now, don't discount this paper at all. It's easily accessible. It's very affordable. It's a great, great paper. Also, I'm going to talk, if you're using liquid watercolors, and the reason why is that liquid watercolors, most liquid watercolors, this particular one are dye-based. So dye-based colors and watercolor mediums work really, really well with this paper. It's just not one of the best papers for washy watercolor techniques. And I'm going to show you when we go do the technique in a few minutes. I'm going to show you the difference between this paper, wood pulp paper, and 100% cotton paper. So we'll just go ahead and move on. Now, one of my other I have two more here to share with you. This is my go-to watercolor paper. Again, it's cold pressed. It's Arches. It's 100% cotton. It is my go-to. I like to buy it. It comes in pads. It also comes on this block so that you can really maximize the washy watercolor techniques that you do on the paper, and it'll stay even on the block versus you having to take that down. But we don't need to get into that today. But this is a really, really great paper. It tends to be a little bit more on the expensive side. I use this paper for actually all of my professional watercolor paintings. So if you're a card maker or paper crafter, if you want to use this paper, it does come in a pad, but it might not be your go-to for your card making projects, but it is a wonderful 100% cotton paper. I always say that the Bee paper is like my go-to for watercolor card making projects. Here is another paper. This one's made by Canson, and this is relatively new, maybe a couple years old. This is a cold press paper, but it's also 100% cotton. And it is, there's a funky painting in there. This is a really, really nice paper. I would say in the Arches line and the Canson line. I love both. I really do love both. And I use this paper a lot for professional paintings as well. It's a really great choice. It is accessible. It's something that is a little bit more on the expensive side versus like the Canson wood pulp paper that they have. So, but it is a really, really nice paper. And I enjoy it a lot. So these two would be these two I would say are like our number one sheet paper. These are like our Mac Daddy papers for doing some watercolor projects that we know we want to frame or keep. For our paper crafting and card making projects, you might not choose these two papers because they're a little bit more on the expensive side. So I hope that clarifies that a bit. Now, I'm going to show this paper. This is Arteza or Arteza. It depends on how you say it. You can tell I haven't even opened this one yet because I've burned through my first set of paper and I just got some more. So this is a relatively newer paper. It's maybe about a year old. It's 100% cotton, made by Arteza, and it's cold press paper. Now I would equate this paper, it's 14 sheets on the watercolor pad. It's another nice 140 pound for paper crafting, card making projects. Bee Paper Company is my number one favorite for 100% cotton. Arteza is becoming my number one favorite as well. It performs very similarly. They both perform very, very well for paper crafting projects. And because the Bee Paper Company is just a little bit hard to find right now in places like Amazon and stuff like that, the Arteza you can pick up directly from their website as well. So if you're interested in this paper, put a comment below. I'll also give you a link. I'll drop some links in the comments for these different papers as well. This is becoming a fast favorite. So you're going to, if you follow me on my YouTube channel, you're going to start seeing this paper a little bit more. Actually, my last two videos, I use this paper. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about brushes. Now, my favorite brushes to use are from the Silver Black Velvet line, and I like to use round brushes. Now, do you need these brushes? No. You just need to find a round brush that you're comfortable with and for working with. The reason why I like these brushes is because they hold a lot of water. And you can see like this brush right here looks like it's kind of frayed, but when I dip it in water, I'm able to get that point. And I just love that point that this particular brand comes to. These are my favorite brushes. They might be a little more expensive than a craft brush that you might find at your local craft store. But they last a long time. I've had these brushes for several years, so they're an investment that lasts a long time. Okay, Merla just asked a question. Merla, what was the size of the Arches block that I showed? Great question. That is let me just grab it and bring it back into our frame. This is a square block, and this is 7.9, so like an 8x8. So 7.9 by 7.9 block. So they have blocks in lots of different sizes, 9 by 12. The reason why I like the Arches brand is because they do squares. They have blocks that are square, and I love it. I absolutely love it. So they do have 9 by 12s, and they also have some other sizes, some skinnier sizes. This seems to be the go-to one I always grab. Okay, so I hope that answered your question, Merla. Thank you for asking. So here is another brush I want to share. This is the Princeton Aqua Elite Round Brush. And I have been test driving this brush, I'm just dipping it in the water here, for a little while now. I really like the point that it comes to. It's a really nice brush. It's a synthetic brush, and it does hold a lot of water. So I've been using this one quite a lot. So these are just two of the brands of brushes that I really, really like. I like the Princeton line. You're welcome, Merla. Thank you. I like the Princeton line very much. I have the Princeton Neptunes. I have a couple other different brushes from Princeton that I really do enjoy. But these two I'm just sharing today. Now you could use any round brush that you have in your stash. If you even have a brush like a water brush, which is a plastic brush where you can put water in it, you can use those as well. So, okay, let's go ahead and move on. If anybody has any questions about brushes, don't hesitate to drop it into the comments. Happy to answer or share some of your favorites. I love it when we all can come together and share all of the different supplies that we like to use. Okay, so I'm going to talk some about watercolor and the different kinds of watercolor that are out there. So some of my favorite watercolors to use are liquid watercolors. Now I've got two different kinds here that I'm sharing from Dr. P.H. Martin's. This is the Hydrus brand, and this is the concentrated watercolor, radiant concentrated watercolor. If you watched my last Gina K Designs video, card tutorial video with the Santana Rose, I used these watercolors to get that radiant, radiant, radiant color. Now, the difference between these two liquid watercolors is that one is dye-based, and that's this one. So if you're a paper crafter and card maker, there are lots of liquid watercolors on the market that are dye-based, and they different brands like the Art Philosophy brand, Hero Arts, Pink Fresh. There's lots of different brands of liquid watercolors. I just love these Dr. P.H. Martin's Radiant watercolors. I've had them for years. They work really, really well, and they are super, super vibrant. So the difference between this one and this one is that this is a dye-based ink versus a pigment-based. So there are pigments in this liquid watercolor, which changes the quality of the watercolor. This particular watercolor, a liquid watercolor that has pigments like a Hydrus, or even I believe the Art Philosophy brand for paper crafting and card making is pigment based, excuse me. I believe that. I'd have to check that. And I do have some of those, and I love those watercolors. I'd have to check that though. The difference with the pigments is that these are more light fast, they won't fade. So it's a different experience with watercoloring with them. I use these quite a bit for my professional projects and my card making and paper crafting projects. So love these, love, love, love. I love using liquid watercolors because you really don't need a lot. You need just a little bit. Like I've got a couple little drops in here from yesterday that I'm just going to reanimate by adding some water to them and using them today. Or I might just add a little bit in there. We'll see. Okay, so these are liquid watercolors. So let's just go ahead and move them out. And these are tubes. Now, there are lots of different watercolor brands, and I'm not going to get into all the different brands today. I'm just getting into the types, liquid, pan, and tube. And most of the things that I'm sharing with you today are on the artist grade quality, and there are student grade quality. Here is my philosophy on watercoloring and getting started. Use what you have, pull it from your stash, practice your techniques, and when you're feeling comfortable and you feel like you want to move into using a different brand or trying out a different brand, do it then. But use what you have when you're first getting started. And maybe in another live stream, I'll show you some different samples of an artist grade watercolor versus a student grade and some of the different brands and show you the difference. But for now, because I believe watercolor is so accessible and we want to experience the most amount of joy, right, from our time with watercolor or paper crafting, card making, or painting, use what you have and get started and just start painting. Okay, so I digressed a little bit. I'm back to tubes. Now, there's lots of different brands of tube watercolors. I'm just showing you some of the Daniel Smith brand here. Tube watercolors are great because you can just put a little bit out into a palette and use the colors that you want to use in the moment. Or you can set up a watercolor palette by pouring these into a pan, similar to this, pouring your color into a pan and setting up more of a portable palette. This is quinacridone coral, one of my favorite colors from Daniel Smith. But some of the differences between the tubes and the liquids is that you can use them on the go. You could use these on the go if you want to, but you know, you'd have to carry them around. You could put these in a palette. So I really enjoy using the Daniel Smith brand. It's one of my favorites. I also enjoy Sennelier. I also enjoy using quite a few different brands for paper crafting, and the Art Philosophy brand and some of the American Crafts brands of watercolors. So let's go ahead. This is a pan set. I'm going to talk a little bit about a pan set. So this is a small pan set, more of a portable. So this is a 12 and this is a 24. So this is a really fun pan set. I've added 2 colors to it from the American Crafts paper fashion line. I was really attracted to it because I really liked these colors and I really liked the portable pan set and I could take it on the go. So this is a pan set. It often comes in 12, 24, or 36. You really could just get started with a set of 12 of your favorite colors and really experience a lot of joy just using a set of 12 and just getting your feet wet. This is a really great set to use. I enjoy that very much for my paper crafting. This is a set of 24 from Sennelier. This is a French watercolor, easily accessible. You can see that the set is pretty well loved. I really like this pan set. It's super, super nice. So this is another portable option and not like super, super heavy. So one of the other pan sets that I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to bring it in. It's a little bit bigger. This is the Bulletproof Glass Palette for watercolor. Now I have 6 of these that I really enjoy using, and I'm going to open this one up. This one's my Mission Gold palette. So basically, I have a nice set of Mission Gold watercolors, and I've taken the tubes and I've squeezed them out into this palette to use here in my studio. So here are the colors that I have that are part of this brand. Now the Mission Gold brand is a really, really nice brand. I could dedicate a whole live stream to just Mission Gold and talk about its use. It's very popular. It's a nice artist grade watercolor, especially for paper crafters and card makers, because it's a great, it's not super, super expensive, but it's a really great watercolor. So here you can see that this palette, watch, I show you the whole palette. It is a big honking palette. So this one stays in the studio and doesn't go out. But I really, if I'm setting up a palette that I want to keep at home, in my home studio, the Magello Bulletproof Glass Palette for watercolor is my go-to favorite. Go-to favorite. Okay. I think I've talked quite a bit about all the different palettes. So let's go ahead and dive back. Let's go ahead and dive in. I'm just switching cameras really quickly. back into talking about my favorite watercolor technique, and that is the wet and wet watercolor technique. I call it the washy watercolor technique. I use it a lot in painting, paper crafting, card making. It's also going to help answer some of the questions that I've been getting about how do I control this watercolor. It's going everywhere. One of the things that makes people most anxious about watercolors that they feel it's a medium that is out of control, but it really is a fun, accessible medium. So let's go ahead, dive back down to the project cam and talk about washy watercolor. Okay, so we're back down here. I'm bringing in this little palette, and I've got two, oops, look at that, stuck my finger right in it. I've got two little pans here. This is a quinacridone magenta, and this is a lemon yellow. And I've got my liquids here. And I'm going to shake these up. Just give these a little shake. Little shake, little shake. And the colors that I had in this palette are good, fine, good to go. But I'm going to reanimate them. I could reanimate them with water, or I could just go ahead and I'm going to just drop a few more drops over top of them because I want them to be nice and juicy for this technique. And I'm pretty sure I put them in the wrong place, but whatever. Live stream, we're going for it. All right, I'm going to drop some yellow in here. This is gamboge, which is like a really, really nice warm yellow, and quinacridone magenta. And it's kind of funny because I love quinacridone magenta, so pinks and yellows, and I've got a yellow scarf on today and a pink sweater, so I kind of have a thing for the pink. Okay, so I'm grabbing my number 8 round, and we're going to do this washy watercolor technique. I'm using some B Paper Company paper. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of move my palette in here so we get a nice good view of this. I'm going to dip my brush into the water. Okay, and I'm just going to first before I do a little bloom and kind of talk to you about making petals, which is the lesson for today, I'm going to just paint a circle with water. And this is a great little warm-up technique for you. And this is also a great way to just get familiar with your watercolors. So I've got quite a bit of water. Let's see if we can turn that to the light so that you can see it. And as I'm tilting it, you can see that that water is only going to stay in the bounds of where I painted it. I'm going to add a little bit of water because this is a thirsty paper. Super, super thirsty. 100% cotton. Okay. Now I'm going to drop in some color, and I'm going to start with the pan. And this pan set, you can see that I'm just adding water, and I'm really able to get that brush super juicy. And I'm dropping this color in, and you can see that it's spidering out. I'm going to clean off my brush a little bit, and I'm going to keep it wet. I've got a little microfiber towel here. Just going to roll the edge, just rolling my brush on the microfiber towel right here just to get off some of that excess water. And I'm just going to coax the watercolor around a little bit. And it's just so pretty. I'm going to drop in some of the yellow and let it do its thing and just play. Now I want to show you what happens. You see how the watercolor, it only wants to go where the water is. You notice how it's not going out of the water, the bounds of where the water is in the circle. And that's because watercolor goes with the flow. It only wants to be where the water is. So that's how it works. So people who ask me the question about controlling it, this is the way you help control your watercolor. It only goes where the water is. So you can see that it's spidering out, and then I can coax it out into where the water is. I can even play with it a little bit more and make it move and flow. So having good water control with your brush will help you control your watercolor. So I wanted to show this because you notice that the pigments can be coaxed out and about. You can see I can drop it in and look at how it spreads. It's just absolutely mesmerizing. I got a little bit outside there. Okay, now I'm going to flip and turn here, and I'm going to do a little petal and show you how to make the simplest way to make a petal with a brush, with your brush and a brush stroke. And I've got some tutorials coming up, and I actually have a brand new class that I'm working on too that's all about brush strokes. Often people will tell me, I can't draw, I can't paint because I can't draw. Well, you don't have to know how to draw. You have to know how to use your brush and use brush strokes to create the effects that you want. So today with our brush stroke, we're going to create a petal. So I'm going to take my brush, and I've got it completely vertically here, and I'm just putting my tip down, and then I'm bending the belly of the brush, wholly bending it, and it's very, very wet because I'm going to go in, take a little bit of that color, take a little bit of that watercolor, and drop it in to the bottom of that piece and just let it flow. Now that P.H. Martin's is super concentrated, super concentrated. I'm going to drop a little bit into that top. Just kind of go with it here and move it around and just kind of coax it around into the water. Now that's a really intense looking petal. I want to pull some of that away, so I'm going to clean off, whoops, I'm going to clean off my brush and then use that same technique, belly of the brush, pull some of that color away. So that is our basic petal. So if I were to do that again, I just put a little bit of paint on my brush, start vertically, belly of the brush, lift, and I get another petal. And I could keep going around, belly of the brush, lift. I got a little bit of a Sharpie there. And I could keep going around and create that whole shape of a flower. I love it. Okay, I'm going to clean off my brush. I'm going to pick up a little bit of the quinacridone magenta here in the pan. I'm going to turn this way. I'm a lefty, so I'm going to turn this way. I'm going to show you another petal that's more like this shape. So it starts here, again, vertically, down and whoosh. So you go down and whoosh. The sound effects are free. There we go. And I've got quite a bit on here. I'm going to see how much more pigment I have on this brush right now. Oops, down and whoosh. So not as much pigment on the brush there, but that's okay. It gives me opportunity to move some of this color around, clean off my brush, move it around. And this is the basic petal. I'm adding a little bit of water to my base here. I'm going to come in with a little bit of that yellow, just kind of drop that in. So you can see that this technique over here is not as wet as this one. Super wet, painted into it. Brush is wet. Paper was a little bit dry. And we're dropping some color into the wet areas that we painted. Wowza. Ugh, I have a habit of getting a ton of water everywhere. Now, when that dries, it becomes super, super soft. So watercolor looks really, really intense when we first paint it, but when it dries, it goes back quite a few shades. So if you want to add more on top, you can easily do that. Okay, so I've been using the paints. I'm going to show you some of the differences here. Let's go over here and look at the Radiant watercolor. So, whoosh, I just dipped my brush into that Radiant liquid watercolor and it is intense, almost fluorescent. Right, so I'm cleaning off my brush again just to kind of show you. So here is the yellow in the Radiant watercolor. Super, super bright. So you get a little bit of a different look and feel with that kind of watercolor. Now I'm going to turn this around and dip this into the Hydrus, which we've seen a little bit of the Hydrus over here. So here's my quinacridone magenta in the Hydrus. So when we're looking at the two, we can tell this one is a dye because of that level of radiance and how almost fluorescent it looks versus our pigment-based paint over here, where you can see I can start to lift some of it away and get some of that away. If I were to go over to my dye-based and try to lift some away, I'm not getting much because it's dye. It's dyed the paper. It's gone into those fibers and it's shampooed. So it's there and it's ready to go. When I'm using my pigment based, which would be my liquid Hydrus or my pan, I've got a little more opportunity to kind of work with it. So let's go ahead and put some of that Hydrus down. See how I can make it move. I can take some of it away. So I can get, there's a difference between the radiance in this color because of dye versus pigment. So, and that would be the same here for, now look at when I paint with the pan, which is pigment, which is tube watercolor. This is just a tube watercolor that I've put into the pan. I've got a lot more room to get some values from light to dark with these colors. They're easier to water down. So, kind of box myself in there. Let's do a little bit there. Same thing with this lemon yellow. And you can see how I can come in and lift some of that color off. And even after this dried for a little bit, I could come back and lift some of that off. But if I go over here to my dye, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to be able to, even now, see I'm scrubbing it a little bit, trying to get some of that color away. So those are some of the differences between the different kinds of effects that you can get with your liquid watercolor versus your tube watercolor versus your pan watercolors. And I love them all. Don't get me wrong. I love them all. Okay, so if I'm going to bring in a couple samples just to kind of show you. So here is some samples of what we've done, but these have dried. So, and I've only done one layer of color, and you can see how they've dried back a little bit. So here was my circle, and I did this one with the Radiant watercolors. And you can see the actual drops. So these were the first 3 drops. Once the dye hits the paper, boom, it goes into the fibers of the paper and it stains. So I'm not going to be able to get smooth out those dots, those initial dots that have happened. So that's one of the things that happens with a dye-based watercolor. Now, coming over to this beautiful little petal here and the softness of this petal, these 2 petals were done with the pan watercolors, and I've got a little bit more of intensity that I've added here and a little bit more water. I added a ton more water when I was using this, so I got a much more softer value of those 2 colors. Again, this was with the pan watercolor. This one was with the Hydrus watercolor, so I'm able to work with the Hydrus liquid watercolor, which is any liquid watercolor that's pigment based, to get some different values of the color. Here is my Radiant watercolors again. Again, a dye-based color. Now look, it's bloomed and gone to the edges of where the water is and set up there. And I've got that nice kind of hard line. I personally like it, but you can see where I originally dropped in those colors and it got super, super dark. So just some examples of how the 3 different kinds of watercolors will perform. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pop back in here. And I hope you really enjoyed this mini lesson. And I have just scratched the surface of watercolor geekery that I know and that I can share. I just have 2 little things I want to share before we close this little live stream for today. And I'm so grateful that you've joined me and so excited to be starting to do this on a more regular basis. I'm looking to pop in and do some live stream mini lessons with me probably every Friday moving forward. So stay tuned to my channel, my business page here, where I'll be posting that that schedule. I'm looking at that 11 to 11:30 time frame, and I might even consider going a little bit later. I'm just trying to work things out, and I would love to hear your feedback. If this time seems to be a workable time for most, that's great. If people are catching it on the replay, I realize we all have different schedules. So just wanted to pop in with that. And I wanted to share that if you want to take a deeper dive with me with watercolor, I have 2 options for you to do that. You can visit my Craft Your Joy classroom. I have an online classroom at craftyourjoy.com, and I have 6 watercolor classes live there right now. If you're on Skillshare, you can follow me over in Skillshare and get my classes there as well. But in my watercolor classes, I kind of go deeper with a lot of different techniques, and we make a project together. I'm predominantly focused on florals and flutters, so butterflies and birds and things like that in the classes. But I do have a mini series of classes that are coming up that I'm working on that take deep dives into techniques with a little more intensity. So that's an option for you if you want to take a look at my online classroom at craftyourjoy.com. I also have my YouTube channel, and if you want to take a look at my YouTube channel, I have hundreds of classes, hundreds of card making, paper crafting, watercolor, lots of different kinds of mini classes, so to speak, on my YouTube channel. So I hope you'll check that out. And my last little offer for today's live is I have a free, and I'm going to just go ahead over to a different screen here and share a little something with you. If you're on my email subscriber list, you already have received this for April. This is the Blooming with Joy note card coloring project. So every month I offer my email subscribers a free download of some sort. Sometimes it's an art print, sometimes it's a whole project that we can do together. This is the project for this month, and it's called Blooming with Joy, and this is the note card coloring project. So the link to subscribe to my email list is in the description for this live stream. Just click on that link and you will be taken to the landing page to put in your email address, and you will also get a bonus download. So you'll get this download and a free art print from me. So I'm going to go over to the project cam. Let's get out of here and we'll head over to the project cam, and I'll show you a sample of this piece, this freebie watercolored. So I watercolored this one. This one is on its way to being finished. And in the download, you will get one option that is full strength black and white, and one option that is a little bit more of a screen tint of the card front, so that you have the option to do watercoloring or any kind of coloring that you want, color pencil, Copic markers, alcohol-based markers, anything with the lines or with no line. This is that no line watercoloring. And this is my gift to you, my gift of grace to you. And I hope you'll head on over and grab this for yourself. This is one of my newer illustrations, and I'm just excited to share it with you. So, okay. So let's go ahead. We've popped back in, and I am just so excited that I got to come in today and live and share a mini lesson with you of my watercolor geekery. And today was all about bloom and flow techniques. And I'm so grateful that you joined me. Thanks to everyone who joined me live. There were so many of you kind of popping in and out. Again, if you check this out on the replay or on my YouTube channel and you have questions, please feel free to put them in the comments and I will absolutely pop in and answer them for you. And thanks so much for joining me. And please consider joining me for the next live stream. We're going to have another one next Friday. And next Friday, I am going to talk about all about watercolor techniques for card making. So I'm going to be doing a card project, and I'm going to talk about some of the watercolor techniques for card making. I've been getting quite a few questions about that lately, so I want to focus on a paper crafting project next week. So I hope you'll join me, and I'll see you next week. Thanks so much for joining me.